Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Elaine Raybourn, and I'm from Sandia National Laboratories. And today I'm interviewing Jay Lofstead, also from Sandia National Laboratories, about how he integrates students into and interns into software development teams. It's really my pleasure to talk with Jay because Jay was also a panelist in the Strategies for Working Remotely panel that we had recently on internships, virtual internships. And so if you'd like to hear more about what Jay does and his approach, I highly recommend that you go to the Strategies for Working Remotely website, which is at the exascaleproject.org. And you can just go up to panel series and mouse over and click on the June panel, which was Jay's panel discussion on interns, virtual internships. So Jay, I read your paper for Collegeville 21, and I really liked it. I thought that it was a really good adjunct to some of the things you said at the panel, what I know about you personally, and just an introduction to what it's like to integrate interns into software teams. And so I know that you have a particular approach that you like to use for recruiting. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that first?
Sure, thanks, Elaine. My motivation for writing the paper is that over the last really decade, I've spent a lot of time trying to bring in students because that's really one of the passions I have in my job is working with students and helping build the next generation, and finding ways to get students to understand what I'm doing so that they want to come, and then finding ways to make them productive on the project, as well as getting good experience for them, has taken a lot of trial and error. So one of the first things that I ran into was I would write job descriptions, and as a PhD, they're PhD style job descriptions where we have this nice big problem statement, and we're way off into the weeds, so to speak, on this particular intricate piece that we're looking at, and students look at that and they have no idea. So I had one intern that I had one summer, or actually it was a fall semester, it wasn't even a summer. I was working the Georgia Tech College of Computing Career Fair, and the student came up and she had an excellent GPA and good experience. And I talked to her about, what are you doing for grad school? Well, it turns out I was the only recruiter at that career fair that talked to her about grad school rather than offering her a job. And in contacting her later, I asked her, are you interested in an internship? And she said, yeah, I'd love to. And I gave her a list of potential projects and not really understanding what I was doing. And she said, great, I'll come and work on something. And she got one of her friends that she knew also to come. And it turns out a few weeks after they got here, she told me, I understood 3 words in the job description, but because you didn't talk to me about a job and about grad school instead, I decided that this was probably going to be interesting. So that's why I came.
That's great. That seems also to be the type of student that you want to have in an internship in a national lab. You know, that you
Right.
want the student that's going to be curious. And not only that, I'm going to say something about you that you wouldn't necessarily say about yourself. And that is, knowing you, I know how much you put of yourself into the internships and your interactions with interns. And I just can tell you that I know that students absolutely love you.
Well, thank
So
you.
what's your
Yeah.
secret, Jay? What is it about the relationship that you build with them?
I think it's probably 2 things. One is that I spend time. And that's something that I know in the internships I had as a student didn't always happen. I was lucky to talk to my mentor maybe for a half an hour a week. And instead, I try to focus with the students of talking to them literally every day. Doesn't matter if I'm traveling, I'll call them up or text them or some other way to just be in touch with them. And the other thing that I like to do is um, give them a lot of ownership about the project itself. The last thing I want to do is put them in a position where they're extra hands for my brain. I want to see where their brain is going to take the project and its goals and what approach they're going to take. And I tell them up front, I said, that 3 sentence description that you saw of the project, that's all I'm going to tell you. It's up to you to figure out how to achieve that, and I'll help you along the way on anything that you need. But when it comes down to making decisions about what to do next. That's entirely your decision. You need to look at what the options are, make a decision based off of some evidence, and tell me this is what I want to do and why. And
Hmm.
unless I know that it's wrong for some reason, that's what we're going to try.
That's
And
great.
I have no idea many times where it's going to take us, but it's usually someplace interesting and different than I expected. And so the students have this a level of control that they just don't get any other place. And at the same time, I do everything I can to support them, no matter how much they have to grow in order to get to where they need to be to actually accomplish things.
That's great. Now, do you think that this type of, developing their mindset this way, do you think it helps them in particular for software development projects?
Absolutely. So I had one University of New Mexico undergrad research assistant.
Mhm.
This was a volunteer thing that the students there, for free, volunteer to try to work with a researcher to learn what research is like. And in the process, I was having him look at container repositories so that we could do some modifications on one.
Right.
And I had him go through and learn about container repositories, learned about how they worked, learn what all their features were. And then it was, okay, now that we've done all of this, we need to pick which one as a starting point and extend it. And I said, that means you're going to have to learn the code, whatever language it's written in, and do all that. And he kind of struggled along as we were going through things. But when it got to the point where he had to actually do something new that hadn't been done before, and he couldn't use Google to find answers, he said, this is too hard for me. And I tried hard to convince him to please continue. And the on-campus advisor even said, hey, gave the best possible response. And that was, this is something that anybody in any software development environment has to be able to do. You can't always Google for the answer. You're going to have to problem solve. And so my job as their mentor is not necessarily to force them into a research career, but to give them the skills that they're going to need either as a researcher or as a software developer, because a lot of them are the same. It's just a matter of, are you aiming at trying to expand knowledge, or are you aiming at trying to make something production work?
Oh, that's great. So then, have you had more than one intern at a time? And do they work in teams? And do you use the same approach when you're dealing with more than one intern?
The most interns that I've had is actually this summer, and I have technically four. I've had two many times, and I've had three a few times, but this is the first time I've had four. One of them is a year-round intern that I've worked with for about 5 years now,
Hmm.
and she's doing her thesis proposal, or finished her thesis proposal and writing up her dissertation. So that
Right.
level of work is a little bit different.
Right.
Um, but the other three, two of them are undergrads and one of them is a PhD student. And all three of them are working on different projects, and I work with them individually. And because of that, it's actually a fair bit of work for me. But when we look at it from a productivity standpoint, I can have a student be 10% as productive as I would be if I spent my time on it, but they can spend 8 hours on it, and I have spent 15 minutes with them and achieved the same amount of output. So in that
Right.
sense, it's absolutely worthwhile. They learn a lot, and I get progress on the projects that I need accomplished.
That's great. So, what suggestions do you have for folks who might be watching this interview about integrating your interns into software development teams?
The first one that most people are aware of is, don't put them on a critical path, because student skills are all over the map. Some are great, some are not so good. Most of the time they can learn, but they may take some time. So if you put them on the critical path, you may be inviting some project pain later.
Hmm.
That said, give them something important to do that's not on the critical path. So
Right.
one example is that I have a project on reproducible workflows, and one of the interns I have for the summer is looking at reproducible machine learning. And that was spawned because we were looking at machine learning workflows and trying to figure out how to make them reproducible, and realize, oh, there's all of these other things that we have to do to handle that part of it. So that's really a separate project from the workflow part of it itself. So she's been running with that, and we've got some really interesting results. And it gives her something to work on that's important, but at the same time, if she succeeds or fails, it doesn't directly impact what my project deliverables are.
Right,
And by giving her a lot of responsibility and choice in what things get done, she's more motivated and feels like this is really her project rather than it being my project. I'm really there to help her rather than the other way around.
right. And what kinds of skills do you think that this approach helps her develop for future software development teams that she might join? Like when she is
Yeah.
ready, yeah,
Yeah.
become a staff member.
Right. So to start with, she's a computer science, I believe, applied math, and has a rhetoric minor or
Nice.
joint degree or something. So she's not really a pure computer science person. So her coding skills were relatively weak. But she never used like Visual Studio before on Windows. So that was the first thing is, okay, let's get you into a development environment because you're not used to developing with just raw command line tools, and that'll be more productive. So got her set up in there. And then the next thing was, okay, now we want to connect your project into the Git repository so that we can make sure we have proper version control, everything. So she got all of that working. And then she had to run a whole bunch of experiments. So I said, you can run them by hand, but we're probably going to have to run more later. So spend the extra time that's going to take up front to figure out how to write scripts for everything. That way you can just run the script and then generate all the results and then run another script and extract all the results out into something that you can process. So all of these things are things that developers really do on a daily basis. You write scripts to handle all kinds of repetitive tasks you have to do. You have to learn how to use your environment, how to properly integrate in with your version control system, and all these kinds of things. So I try to make sure that whether she goes down a research road or not, the skills that she has will translate well into any kind of a production kind of career.
Right, exactly. And I was going to mention that it probably looks really great on her resume too. She's got a
Right,
great project that she can talk about. I
right.
know that when I do my recruiting, I really look for that to
Yeah,
just understand how involved the student was in the project
yep,
and whether or not any decision-making power was given to them.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm 8 for 8. I was trying to count. It might be higher than that for interns that I've had that have managed to get a research paper out of their work from one
great.
term of working with me. So this summer, I
That's,
know I'm going to get two more directly by the end of the summer. And then the other one are getting a dissertation, so that one's fine. But the fourth one is probably going to take another few months.
that's great. Well, I look
Yeah,
forward to meeting your interns at the Collegeville Workshop.
yeah.
Hey, listen, before we close, is there anything that you want to mention that's a takeaway for anyone that's watching the interview about anything internships and
Mhm.
interns? I know you've got a lot of experience with that. So we've talked about some really good tips. Do you have any others?
Yes, probably the number one thing to do is to when you write a job description that you want people to apply to, find somebody that is in that target group of people that you want to hire and have them look at it and give you honest feedback. Because I know I'm so far removed from an undergraduate experience that when put in words in a job description, I think I'm being really simplistic in general, but it turns out that I'm still looking at somebody with a master's degree, potentially more than an undergrad, just because they just don't know the words yet. So try to make sure that you vet your job description with the target audience so that you can actually get the applications. Then
That's great.
the
Oh,
other
go
one
ahead.
is to empower your interns as much as possible and include them in things as much as possible. And it will terrify them at first, but at the same time, they'll be extremely motivated because it's theirs and it's the most anybody's ever trusted them to do anything.
That's
So,
awesome. I have one question that just occurred to
yes.
me that people might want to ask. Do you have a formal onboarding process for your interns, or if not, is there anything that you're using that seems to work for you?
What I normally do, and I've gone to a couple of extremes on this. The one bad extreme that I went to, fortunately, it was a very good student and it worked out okay, is I explained my Office of Science funded project in 30 minutes on a whiteboard. And I circled part of it and I said, this is yours. What are you doing? And that was way too far. So now what I do is I say, okay, this is kind of the big goal of the project. This is what we're trying to accomplish for the summer. This is what I think we can do. Let's figure out how much we can get done. And my job is to help you get there. There's know things that are too basic questions to ask. So my near graduation PhD student right now, when she started, after her first meeting with me where I circled the piece on the whiteboard, she came back and said, I don't know databases, I don't know networking, I don't know data structures, I don't know like 4 other things. And I said, okay, well, here's how you get started on each of them. And from that point forward, she's like, okay, he'll help me with anything. I just need to get going. And it took her a little while to get up to speed, but after that, she just ran.
That's
And
awesome.
now she'll trust me with any kind of question.
Oh,
And
good.
so that works great.
That's great. And that's something that actually we've sort of talked around, but it's the first time you mentioned the word trust, which I
Yeah.
imagine is really an important part of being a mentor and having an intern. Do you want to
Yeah.
say anything else about that before we close?
Sure. So for me, I make sure that I tell the interns I know when your body works best and your brain works best is probably different than mine. So as long as we have a time to talk every day, work what hours work well for you. And this works particularly well when we're doing virtual internships because who knows what time zone they're in for one, and the other, they can adjust however, and we can just schedule our meetings whenever that works out for both of us. In person, it's a little more tricky because we have to worry about things like the building alarm.
Yeah.
And so I just tell them, attend all of the required meetings, attend as many seminars as you think might be even remotely interesting because you never know what you'll learn. And other than that, work when it's comfortable for you. And that way, they're also being trusted to get the job done. And part of talking to them every day is a way of indirectly kind of checking up on them. Are they actually making progress? Are they doing things? So it may seem like you're giving them a lot of trust, but at the same time, with that short, even 5 or 10 minute daily check-in, you're keeping track of things. So you know if something's happening or not. So if they're goofing off, which just doesn't happen really, you'll know it.
I bet those 5-minute check-ins also result in talking about what they're thinking, not necessarily on a status report.
Right. Yeah.
So it's much more meaningful for you and for the intern.
Right. So like I had 3 check-in reports today. So one of my check-in reports today was the University of New Mexico replacement student that I have. And his assignment for the week from me was to do a tutorial for the Go language about doing web-based applications.
Oh, cool.
And he went through because he was struggling trying to extend this bit of Go code,
Hmm.
and part of the problem is that it was a web application. And by doing the tutorial, he started with our meeting and said, I didn't get much done. And I said, but what you accomplished is you now probably have a 70% understanding of how this whole structure works. You understand Go better. And now you can go back to the code that you're trying to extend, and at least you know what questions to ask. And he said, yeah, that pretty well hit it right on the dot. So I said, that made it a perfect week. You were extremely productive.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. So it's not always about code written or documents written or papers read. It's more about what did you learn and understand, because everybody's got things they have to learn. You'll hit a roadblock and say, I don't know what to do next. It's like, spend a day and do some research and tell me what you figure out. And then we can figure out from there. And it may take a few days or even a week or two to work
Mhm.
through all those details. But um, showing them that you're not afraid of them spending time doing these other tasks that are absolutely essential also helps build their trust, both from you to them as well from them to you, because they say, okay, he sees this as important. He's not mad at me for having spent my time like this. I guess this is something that's worthwhile to do. And it's something, again, they'll have to do in a career no matter which way they go, is
That's right.
spend time doing research.
That's it. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate our time
Yeah, you
today.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Jay, and we will see you in Collegeville.
Great. See you then.
All right, take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.